Ashley, welcome to Creative Survival. I am super stoked to have you here. I think this is going to be a awesome, unique perspective on creativity and walking that out in just some form of healthy lifestyle. But for the audience who doesn't know who you are, I'm going to toss you the ball and just kind of give us a rundown of just kind of what you do.
All right. Well, perfect. And Craig, thank you so much for the invitation. And I'm glad to have survived because it's been wild and it's been crazy. So a little bit about myself is I am walking into this creative process. And so I'm a creative, which is cool to admit. I'm also a recent soul care practitioner. And so that works with inner healing and emotional healing. And so otherwise, I feel like a blank canvas that's just ready for daddy to paint on me and show me what this picture looks like. So that's a nutshell. Oh, and then I have a wonderful hubby. So he's awesome. And I'm a pet parent. So those are some fun things about me.
So when you say soul care practitioner, what exactly does that mean?
It's a lot to it. But simply for where I am in my journey, it means being willing to understand the process that I need to go to or go through to help others, because sometimes we try to help people without trying to help ourselves, being expert led. And so I've done that too. But it's really understanding who you are, your identity in God, and being able to help other people to process where they are emotionally. So, life is hard. But life is rewarding, but sometimes we have a hard time seeing that it's rewarding because life is hard. So I really found myself being that bridge or that support to help people see that life has value and purpose and dealing with some of those challenges that we just really don't know how to deal with.
So what led to that journey of reaching a spot where you're like, oh man, like I've been through all this and this is my experiences and now I want to help people be able to almost accelerate through that and then have just like their own personal breakthrough. What for you was that journey?
Well, a lot of my journey, if you think of the kid who they tell you need to go here, I'm the kicking and screaming, no, don't take me there. That was me. So it wasn't one of those journeys I said, yes, Lord, I'm going to help people and I'm going to deal with my own emotional issues. It was one of those things that the emotion hit me, it found me, and I really didn't know how to deal with it. And then after working through, we're always going to be a work in progress. So had to come to that tough realization too, that this is not just a one-time thing. You get healed and you move forward, but it's like you got to continue to face those things. And then I really didn't want to help anybody. Like, oh, surprise. I didn't know that was going to be a part of the story because I just got comfortable with it for myself. It was hard to deal with. But then when God was like, you need to bring this to other people, I'm like, but why? Like, it was already painful going through it myself. How can I help someone? So it was one of those things that God had to walk me through. And I'm still getting to that level of comfort, honestly, that this is really what he wants me to do, because I just thought I got to talk to people who had it together. That wasn't God's plan for me. And no one has it together the way we think that we do. So
I was going to say, if you talk to people who have it together, who are you going to talk to?
I found that out, but when it comes to dealing with issues, which I think it ties in with so much stuff, and it really is a part of my story and this whole creativity thing, is that first of all, it's hard for us to admit, like, hey, I'm in the person in the room and I got problems, because you don't see a lot of that. You don't see a lot of that open honesty, vulnerability. You see people who are shoving things down, pretending like everything's a-okay, and you don't know that they cry at home. You don't know that, there's struggles that they go through because they never admit it. But then at the same time, that's the perfect place for us to be, because the reality is no one does have it all the way together. And when we're open and we're like transparent about what we're going through, that's when we can really help someone. But in our mind, we're like, I don't want to tell them that. For me, I had a story of being angry with God. Now, that sounds contradictory for a couple of reasons. One, because I'm a leader in ministry. So you don't think of people who are leaders in ministry being angry with God and preaching and talking about the love of Jesus. You think about this person who's like, they, themselves and Jesus are best friends. Well, let me tell you, that's not how it works. You go through stuff too as a leader. And then to say you're angry at God, that sounds even more contradictory because he's good, and you don't hear people say that. But I was angry with God. And the cool part about it for me was getting to that place of being okay with I'm angry with him, but I love him actually helped me to heal and work with people who are like, I'm angry with him too, and get past those blockages. But as soon as I was like, I just love you, Lord, and I'm singing praise and worship, and I'm leading people into the presence of God, and I'm holding that part in because again, who wants to hear before praise and worship? You know, I'm really mad at him, but I'm about to sing his praises. Like again, that sounded super crazy, but that was a place of healing for me to understand that even in my relationship, in any relationship, you get mad. And it doesn't mean you love the person any less. It just means I'm really upset. And so those were things that by learning that it's okay to say those things, and it doesn't mean you're blaspheming the Lord or, your relationship is in question or you don't have enough faith. That was my point of freedom.
That's awesome. Yeah, one of my favorite prayer passages in the Bible is in Jeremiah, where after like he goes and does all the stuff he's supposed to do, and he just keeps getting thrown in jail and beat up and stuff, and at the end he's just like, look, God, I'm really angry. He's like, you told me this, and this happened, and this happened, and he's like, you're awesome, but I am pissed off right now. Like this is you need to give me some answers. What for you, like during that process, how were you able to kind of work that out and just kind of, at least in that stage, work through that kind of anger?
Well, slowly, because I still, even though I'm one of those quiet, angry people. So some people are angry and let it out. I'm not very expressive. So my anger can look like I'm really happy. I'm just joyful. I'm full of the joy of the Lord. But on the inside, I'm like, why are we doing this again, God? Don't you know I asked for a break? And now you're bringing this other challenge? Like we had a deal. You're messing up your point of the bargain. But it was being open to admit it, just in a conversation. If you have frustration or you have something in your heart against someone, and this is scriptural, you go to that person, you let them know. But what does it come? I mean, what happens when we're angry with God? We don't follow that biblical model, and we don't go to him. We're just like, he knows my heart. So, he'll figure it out. But he wants that courtesy of just, us being open and saying, I'm not feeling you today. I'm questioning this relationship. And that opened the door. And it wasn't perfect and it wasn't beautiful. And it wasn't like, dear Lord, my heart is so heavy against thou. It wasn't anything like that. Sometimes it was like, I'm just mad. So that opened the door because I had a hard time expressing emotion. So I stuffed that emotion in, which is not good to do. But when you stuff it, then you have a hard time getting it out. So sometimes I'm like, I'm just mad at you. Like, answer me today by 2 o'clock. And that started the dialogue because he wasn't looking for me to be perfect. He was just looking for me to get it out. And then oftentimes I'm, again, like that screaming, crying kid that you've had to tug off the wall. I went to sleep beautifully because he's like, I was just waiting for you to say that. That if that's all you have, that's all you have. Had the best sleep of my life, and he still loves me for it.
What role on creativity did that play, especially like within identity? Because for you being faith-based and then being surrounded in that kind of circle, and then doing something that generally most people, like you said, don't admit to, like, I'm angry, I'm confused, like this is what the hell, God? Like what role did that play, like, on identity and creativity and being able to find that?
I always had a way of expressing creativity. I pushed that down. And so it helped me to find that space again. So like as a kid growing up, I loved playing the piano. I was a drummer. So, I mean, you can get out a lot of aggression beating a drum or a tambourine or something crazy. So I made a lot of noise. And dance and singing were just outlets for me. Just to be able to get things out. And so one of my favorite people is David, because I think David and I would have been like first cousins. Like if we were in like the family chain, we would have been really close, because we have some similarities. And so David was not only a worshiper, but he was a warrior. So there was that, oh, tending to the sheep, singing songs to the Lord. And then there was that fighter, and don't mess with him. This is a guy that you want to have as a friend and not an enemy. But the cool part about it was he was still a man after God's own heart. So just because he had these two different expressions, don't get close to him, he can take you out, and then the lover of God and people, that I had to learn that was okay to have a warrior and a worshiper in me. That it wasn't a contradiction. And so for me, finding that place and seeing those examples and just seeing, how other people can express themselves, it opened me up to the process that, I see an executive, I think, all they do is they work all day, but that might not be it. They have hobbies. They have things that they enjoy planning for. Some people, you see them in one light, but they're awesome writers. They love writing poetry. So why can't I enjoy that? But I stifled that. That wasn't anything that anyone did. That was me feeling that you can only be this. You can only be a leader in one focus, but you can't be creative, instead of seeing that creativity is a part of our DNA. It says God created. So that's pretty significant. That's in like Genesis. So that's in the beginning. So if he created, then why is there an issue with me creating?
I think that's an important point, because a lot of times, I've mentioned this in other interviews, is I think there's like this misconception of like, oh, you have to, like, creativity is something that you just have, or like you're kind of like, it's only for the people who were born to be artists, and like, oh, like it's like this weird box that's around it, when in actuality we all have creativity, and we all express ourselves in creative ways that might not necessarily be like the social norms, but we all have that inside us that can come out. What's your take on, like, so if someone was like, well, I don't really see myself as that creative, like, that's, that's for that crowd, like it's not for me. How would you kind of go about them kind of exploring that?
Gotcha. Well, first of all, I would have to say, because this is my process, is you have to open yourself up to that childlike wonder that we've suppressed. So somewhere between childhood and then the teenage years, sometimes the creativity can just shut down. And I don't know if we try to become those responsible adults, or we're thinking about the 18-year-old who gets to move out and I'm going to go to college and just be an adult. And then you realize, oh, I had it great at home. I don't know where that switch shifts off. But we have to go back to that place, because that's what the kingdom is about. The kingdom is about that childlike wonder. Kids don't care if they have all the answers. They are just willing to play, and they're willing to have fun. So I would ask a person who has some issues with creativity, go back to that place. Where was the last time that you felt like you could just have fun? It didn't matter how good, bad, or whatever you were at whatever you did, but what was that like? And sometimes opening people up in that place reminds them of, there are things that I like to do. And that doesn't mean I'm going to sell my coloring page on eBay and it's going to make bukus of money, but something that I can just enjoy. But I would also remind them of just what creativity looks like. Some people know it as creativity, other people know it as innovation. So in any field or sector, you have to have a level of being able to problem solve, to look at things and what things look like and come up with solutions, because usually what the end goal is not what you have, put together. So that takes creativity. So I would challenge people to think about just what that looks like, because we have to be creative. If you've ever had 15 minutes to get dinner together and certain number of ingredients and had to make it work, guess what? You had to be creative to do that. That's a gift. If you've ever had to find out, some guests are on their way to your home and how can I make everything work, and you didn't know that the family was dropping in for a visit, you got to be creative with that. So it's just looking at the ways that we use it and then letting people know it's okay to explore. So even if you don't find yourself or feel that you're creative, give some things a try. Again, it doesn't mean that you're going to be a Van Gogh or, a paint, a phenomenal photo or whatever the case is, or be a world-renowned dancer. But guess what? You can still have fun doing it, and life is meant to be enjoyable. So that's what I would share with someone.
Absolutely, yeah. I hope people find that kind of enjoyment in life. What about so like, let's say for myself, like I make a living off like a creative industry. Um, but like I do it for work, and even though I find enjoyment in it, like that's what I do, and then I have like a mortgage, I got family, like a lot of people, like that becomes almost like a grind in a way. And then it's like, well, then how do I then find an outlet for my creativity, or how do I continue to grow in that or have freedom in that in my own voice? How would you what would be your take on like someone in that situation wanting to be able to walk out into something better?
Gotcha. Well, I was a mental grinder, so I totally get it. Because before I embraced this journey, I did not think I was going to be teaching what I am now. So I was also borderline upset with God for that. That this is a new direction, because I had a perfect plan that if you let me work it out, my business could advance to the way that we think it needs to go. So I just needed Father, Son, and Holy Spirit to be on one page, and it would work like that. But I've learned that we also have to have that ability to dream with God. We have to not get so proficient in something that we leave God in the background and just say, okay, continue to bless my efforts now. And he's saying, I want to be a part of this. I want you to incorporate me. I want you to ask me questions, because your view is limited. My view is limited, but he sees the whole picture. And so we also have to be willing to take risk. And sometimes when we get into a rut per se, we're like, okay, this is working, God, don't change it because we're good. And I have a family and I have other responsibilities. But he's saying, trust me with the risk. Because if I'm telling you to take this risk, then I already know how it's going to work out. So it's going to feel uncomfortable to us because we don't see the final picture. But again, he sees beyond our sight. His thoughts are beyond our thoughts, his ways beyond our ways. And we will forever, honestly, stay in a rut until we can take those childlike risks. So Peter got a bad rap. He was very mouthy, but guess what? He can say, I tried walking on water. And the only reason he had an issue was because he took his eyes off of God. So we have to understand that even in the creative field and having those careers, our key is to look at God. And it doesn't mean we're not going to have moments to sink, because guess what? We're going to get like Peter too, like, hey, I'm doing this and y'all still on the boat. But even in those moments, there's grace and there's protection that God's going to pick us up when he's like, okay, now look to me. Don't look around. Don't tell your friends like, hey, I'm doing this and you're not. Trust in me. Oh, you sank a little bit because you took your eyes off me, but I still love you. Let's keep walking. And so that's what we have to remember, so that we're open, because change is inevitable, as much as I love for things to stay the same. And so I want to encourage, other creative leaders. You have to be cutting edge and you have to remain innovative. So it would be nice to say, just continue to follow your plans as is, but God can give us a bonus strategy way before, something changes, and we can be prepared and on the cutting edge. But if you're just doing things as is, you're going to be like Blockbuster, and Blockbuster wasn't ready for a red box. So we don't be like that. We want to keep staying in business and thinking of new ways that we can reach those that we're called to serve. So
I like that. I like that analogy. 'Cause, yeah, especially when you see certain things shifting in other areas, and not to say too, like a lot of times, like you said, it's easy to be like expert led or guru led or like money led, and we tend to go where those say that we should go, when in actuality there's like this other path that we should go that might seem counterintuitive, but it all, like all the other stuff, money and all that stuff, is just a byproduct of, if we just take this, and it's so much more fulfilling rather than almost swimming upstream in a
Right.
way. And then just to clarify for anyone who might be exploring the space, like when you say like God will like send you in a new direction, it's not like, oh God, I'm gonna go do this, come with me. Like
Right.
that was me for a very long time. Like, I'm doing this project, so go ahead. Like, here we go. Like, you're clearly like you're on my back, like Yoda, right? Like, I'll just take you all around the swamp, and you just train me. That's how this works, isn't it?
Yeah. It would be nice if it worked like that, but he's like, no, come follow me. That means I'm leading the way, and you're the one who's following the path that I have for you, and not trying to veer and create your own path. And then again, saying, okay, God, I'm glad you're over there. Come on over here with me. I have a better plan.
What would you say to someone? Let's say someone's still watching this, that are either like is been like hurt by the church or people in it. Which, if you've been in any kind of church situation, that's bound to happen. I mean, church people are the nuttiest people I've ever met in my life. Like, so, like they are. It's such a strange thing. Like if someone's just looking at this and they're like, what does that even look like? Like, you say, like, you can be angry at God. You say you could be creative with Him. You say that He shows you where to go. Like, what in the world does that even look like? Because that all sounds like fairy tales and magic.
Yeah. I gotcha. Well, what I would tell to that person is that in their creative process, like if they're going through church hurt, which is super common, and honestly, the building didn't hurt us. It was the people inside of it. So the church building didn't hurt us, but the people inside of it. In any relationship, there's that risk. What I would tell them is that you've got to get it out, though. There's so many people who have dealt with church hurt that are afraid, for very good reasons, of even saying, I've been hurt, because they're afraid of what people are going to say about them. They might have friends who still go to the church who don't have the same problem. So then there's some criticism and judgment and shame, that you still have to get things out. And so we talked about, some drawing, painting, singing, those type of things. But some people need to write that out and actually explain, this is what the hurt looked like. And I did that one time. I actually wrote a book on church hurt, because I couldn't sing it out. There was not enough praise and worship songs for me to say, I'm hurt, I'm really, really hurt. There was nothing like that. At the time, I wasn't painting anything, so that wasn't an option. Dancing angry makes you tired, so that wasn't helpful. But sometimes it's turning that pain into something that can help someone else. And so for me during that time, it was, how can I help someone else in this position? What attention can you bring to help someone else not to go through that hurt? So it doesn't take away the pain or the sting of what happened, but what it can do is it can be something turned into good. And so I would encourage those who have gone through hurt that sometimes the experience was really real, but what can you do to help someone else who might find themselves in another place? Is it even just sharing? Sharing your story. So it doesn't even have to be on a physical medium, but can you just share your story with someone who might need it? And that's a creative way of healing or starting conversation. So other people can say, hey, that was me too. I had that same experience. Sometimes it was the same person, which I think is very unfortunate, but it can happen. But it starts dialogue. And so I would tell that person to be open to that. But then sometimes you need to find a way to get that emotion out, in whatever way that works or looks like for you. Now, I haven't done these exercises yet, but there's one book, it's called Art Sozo. And one of the suggestions in that particular book mentions, what does angry look like? Use paint. What does anger look like? What does shame look like? What does hope look like? So some of us are visual people. We need to actually color out, paint out what that emotion looks like. Some of us like to write things, but whatever that looks like, just get the emotion out. Don't look for perfection, because I mean, anger is not perfect. Anger is what it is, but at least be able to know what it is. And then you can dig deeper into the why. And we don't often do that. So we just say, I'm angry. They hurt me. But what were some other things? So I would challenge that person to, like, let's go deeper. Why did that make you angry? How did that make you angry? What specifically was a trigger for you? Because we don't want that to continue to happen, that, you know, you're triggered. And I actually have a very good friend. Every time they have an encounter with someone in ministry, they're triggered. Well, let's look at why. Because I mean, you can meet a minister in the grocery store. I can't, you know, what can we do about that? They're there. You know, they have to eat too. So like, let's look at what's triggering you about that, so that you can, you know, get some internal healing around it, so that no matter what, you're healed, you're whole, and you're in that process with God, and not just so angry and just stuffing that anger in for years and years.
Oh, that's really good. When you mention art sozo, for anyone who's never heard of that word or experienced that, kind of, what is that, or like, what's the process of walking that out?
It is amazing. And I'm learning a lot from just seeing how different people approach it. This particular book that I was referencing, I love that it actually has you draw things out, and it tells you up front, you don't have to be an artist and you don't have to be super skillful, but it's going through a process of seeing where those wounds are that maybe you've suppressed, and then having a conversation with God, asking him for healing or for clarity, based on painting or drawing, or just being creative. And so it's a good process, because again, one of the other blockages we experience is just being able to have that conversation with God, because we feel like it has to be, dear Heavenly Father, maker of heaven, earth, sea, sky, trees, Church's Chicken, Popeyes, and In-N-Out Burgers. And he's like, what? Like, you don't talk like that in your normal life. But it's not that. But it teaches you how you can ask him, because it tells us in scripture, if we lack wisdom in something, we ask God. And so it's that dialogue of, I'm painting this out and we're asking God questions. Where is the block? What is the hurt? What is the wound? And then asking him to, if it's a matter of something that we've done or said against ourselves, because sometimes we can be our worst critics, it's being open and saying, you know, God, please forgive me for being critical of myself in this area. And sometimes, well, we're really good at being critical sometimes at other people. So it also will take you through a process of, you know, God, if I've said anything offensive that grieves someone, or I held these judgments against someone, you know, help me to be able to release them. So it's one of those processes of just having the conversation with God. And the cool thing is, you don't have to remember any of the steps that I shared. Super cool, because he might take you through a different process of, he shows you the work, and then he puts something on your heart to just release forgiveness, or to just release an emotion that you have had pent up. So it's not one of those things that I've got to have the book in front of me, and Ashley was talking about this art sozo, but because I don't have the book in front of me, I can't receive the healing. Not at all. It's just opening the process of communication with God, so that you can experience healing and deliverance.
That's awesome. How about, so like, let's say I am outside looking in, even like, let's say I even was raised in church, but a very religious church, not relational, because there's such a huge difference. And so for me, like, you approach God in this like way, and it's very rigid, and like, you like always have to have your head bowed, and like, you have to say these exact words in this order, or even like someone just looking into the church, and it's like, this is just like repetition, almost seems like, of actions, but like, they want to maybe even just take this for a ride and see if we're just full of ourselves. You know, like, what is inner healing even look like, and how would someone even just kind of begin to even approach that?
Good question. So well, I think I'll say this one at the end, but one thing to always know, is that there are people like ourselves, and I think we're pretty phenomenal. I mean, not tooting our own horn, but I think we're pretty great. There are always people out there who are willing to walk through the process with you. And so some of us need that walkthrough, that mentor, that friend I can just call and will walk with me. And that's what we're here to do. But then even in your own private space, one of the things that I do is I try to make a playlist. And so for me, music opens me up to be able to hear and also to open up my emotions. So nothing crazy, nothing, too heavy or like out there, but sometimes something classical, something just very calming. But then some of us can't go too calm because we'll go to sleep. So you got to know that fine balance. But music that focuses on relationship, and just being open to God, like one that I can think of, open the eyes of my heart, Lord. I want to see you. That's all I want to see. I don't want to see my neighbor. I don't want to see someone else's story. I'm just looking for myself. So something along those lines. And then asking him to walk through the process with you. Again, because I hate to teach people to a blueprint, because then they're like, well, this didn't work for me because you gave me this blueprint. Sometimes I'm just sitting before God, or I'm just sitting listening to worship before my pen and my paper or, my artwork does anything. I'm just spending that time. So be open to that, I would say. And then just allow him to take you through this process. Now, what it will require is being vulnerable, which means we've got to be real. We can't hold back any part of our story. We can't hold back any part of our pain, our frustration. And God can handle it. His shoulders are big enough to handle it. So putting it out there, and then also giving him the place to respond. So not just saying I'm angry, I'm frustrated, I'm hurt, but God, I'm inviting you to talk with me. Will you please show me what's going on, or will you please help me, or will you tell me why I'm so frustrated? Will you help me in that process? And he will. So, and again, in any conversation, sometimes we have a long conversation and sometimes it's brief. And we also have to understand that God will speak to us and bring about healing, not just with us sitting with our eyes closed or read this scripture and say it 15 times. That's weird. And I don't know why we do that, but we do. But he can also speak through songs or billboards. He can speak through phrases or words. So we also have to be open that God might respond in a word, not in like sentences that go on for days. He might respond and we see a billboard or a t-shirt or a video and it says something that we need to hear to heal, that we are open to that. Because God is not in a box. We might try to be in a box, but he is far removed from a box. And movies too, oh my goodness. And that's why I love, video and film, because and maybe I'm dating myself or telling on myself, but I'm going to tell on myself. So I have absolutely loved watching The Umbrella Academy on Netflix. It's a Netflix special. I've loved it though because it spoke to me. And the reason it spoke to me, because you see all the dysfunction in these sibling relationships, and then you have this sibling who feels invisible. And at first I just thought I was watching, but then God's like, you feel like that one. I'm like, I sure do. So he can speak to us in movies as well. And it doesn't have to be, and I love Christian films, but it doesn't just have to be in Christian films. He can speak in Dora the Explorer, however he wants to. He just wants us to get the message and to love on us. So I would tell people to also be open to the answers, not just, in your time of sitting, but be open throughout the day.
I like that. So just to recap, so approach 100% you with all baggage, all emotions, and just let it out in the way you would normally speak. Up yours. This is where I'm at. This is how I feel. This is what I feel you've done to me. But don't have a one-way conversation. Be there with the right attitude of wanting to be like just confronting someone in your family or circle of friends, or even a stranger. Like, if you just ran and screamed at someone and then ran away, you'd be like, well, okay, cool. Like, that was an interesting experience. Like, show up and, like, just kind of let him work. And then I think it's, like, a thing to emphasize is, like, God, like, there's this, like, weird, I don't know where it comes from, but, like, God isn't, like, talking like this megaphone voice. Like,
That's
you
right.
shall like Monty Python, like he shows up in the clouds, like, find the Grail, like it's usually like you said, like there's either like this like feeling that you get, or you might hear or sense like a word, or there's just something that you just kind of know. It's a different relational experience,
Right.
if that makes sense.
Right. And I would say, and I'm glad you said that, Craig, because yeah, it's not going to sound in this big booming voice of, I am God, hear me roar. It's not, and sometimes it's a still small voice, which can be hard. Because when I heard people say that, I'm like, that sounds deep and spiritual. Like, what's this still small voice sound like? Well, it sounds like peace. And peace is just a feeling and a knowing that he's sharing something with you. But it often sounds like ourselves, just, and you wonder, like, God, what is this? And it's not you, but it's Holy Spirit speaking to you. So you'll know it, but it's nothing reserved for ministers or teachers or doctors, or it's available for all of us, all who want to receive. So that's the cool part about it.
So then, for you, like what's a practical way you've been able to walk that out in your kind of just creative journey in what you do?
Oh goodness. Um, the way that I'm having to work it out now is being open to dream with God. And I think I mentioned it a little bit before without going into detail. But what I mean by that is I had put God in a box, and I had said, well, God, this is what creativity looks like. And it seems pretty limiting according to my boxes. And it caused frustration. Anytime we're boxed in, you feel limited. And so the answer for me was to be open to God-sized dreams, which also brought about some frustration. So it wasn't one of this wonderful, yay, Jesus. It was frustrating because I had limited myself, and just thought in limitations. And I believe what God is doing through creativity is letting us know that we're beyond that, that He's given us every mode to express and to have that conversation or relationship with Him. But for me, seeing that and seeing all the possibilities, not knowing that it's not going to be tomorrow. Like, I'm not going to walk into billion-dollar properties like by tomorrow. Like, that's just not going to happen. It's a process. Everyone that he has relationship with, he takes through a process. And so knowing that um, it's okay to dream big. It's okay to have moments and days where you don't have answers. That's the perfect place to be in his, definition, not mine, but his. And being open to how he just allows me to play. That's something that I had given up on. So I was one of those real serious people who thought, you're an adult, you don't have fun anymore. You just go to work and do responsible stuff. But for me, that creative process has been, let's just enjoy. You know, God built Hobby Lobby, or He put it on someone's heart for me to go in and have fun and get some craft stuff if I want to. He allowed me a place to just, music is everywhere. I can sing at the top of my lungs if I want to. So the only limitations are the ones that I placed on myself. And it's just been exploring, just having fun and learning what that looks like. So I don't even put myself on a must paint today. No. If I want to paint and he leads me to paint, I'll do it. If he says dance, or, I just feel led to have a good time, I'll do that. So it's just been a lot of exploring.
What do you think, going to your limitations that you put on yourself, what do you think led to some of those limitations, and what did they look like?
Gotcha. I've actually been digging deeper into that. One of my limitations that I feel is that for me, family means a lot. And so I grew up with some very amazing family, grandparents and things like that. And when they left, or when they, passed on to be with Jesus, which I was mad at him for that too. It's like, you take the good ones, Jesus. But that for me put a creative block there because there was a loss. And instead of like processing what that loss felt like, I just was secretly angry. and still serving and doing all of these kind of things. So that was one area of blockage. But then the second one was I put definitions on it that God never did. So, I heard him, and this was actually in one of our mentoring groups. Like 2015, God said, be creative. And I got this canvas and I was painting and I was like, yes, Lord. And I'm like, I don't want to be a starving artist. So this doesn't sound any cool anymore. And I limited myself there because, again, instead of just enjoying the process and knowing that even in the creating, there's answers, there's strategies, I'm like, well, there's not an immediate answer. So, like, let's stop this right now because, like you mentioned earlier, have bills to pay, you have a family, you have a mortgage, and you can't call the mortgage company and say, hey, I'm being creative. Can you take this artwork as payment for this month? So then understanding that, he even cares about those kind of things in our lives. So I did work during that time. I didn't just, take off and just have a creative, fest of I'm just trusting God and I'm just paying bills with artwork and dance and all this kind of stuff. But he still even worked a plan for that. And so knowing that now, because it keeps coming back up, God's serious about it. So that means that I can try to run another set of years and it's, his heart is still going to be the same. So you get tired of running and you just say yes. And you just walk it out step by step at his pace, not putting parameters on, by the end of this year, I need to have this financial status or I need to have this many homes on islands. Nope, enjoying the process and just asking him, but being clear. So you have to be clear, though, about the things that you desire. And sometimes we don't dream enough, which was my case, and we don't ask God for, hey, can you show me what avenues will be or bring blessings to my family? So because we do have a mortgage, we do have a car. So we're kind of vague about what we want. We're like, I want a house. But what type of house? What type of income? I want to be successful as a creative leader. Well, what does that success look like? Does it mean, you just want to be great at hobbies, or does it mean that you want to influence, families or generations or leave a legacy? Be detailed, because that gives him something to work with. Not that he doesn't know the plan, but we've got to give him something to work with.
And then what would you say would that look like? Like, let's say I approach God and I'm like, God, I want to be a billionaire. I want to do what I want. I want my yachts. I want private planes. I want to eat wherever. I want to travel the world and eat everywhere on Chef's Table. Like, I love that show. I just want to go spend millions of dollars on just like all this stuff. Like, and then I'm gonna pray and like I'm gonna just sit here and wait for it. Like, what? And then 20 years down the road, I'm like, God, you didn't give me my desires. Like, what's that? Like, what is that? Like, I'm not saying that it's the weird misconception that we're not supposed to have wealth if you follow God. It's a weird church thing. But like, what is that? What does a healthy desire and like action look like?
No, good question. And I kind of believe that I was that person who was like, okay, Lord, I want to travel every day and you're going to bless that. But his desires are also, and his desires are pure. So it doesn't mean that our desires are, horrible. It's not a bad idea to, want to eat at the chef's table or, to travel all over the world. But he has a purpose and he has a plan for us. And so usually our expectations, if they're just plans that we develop in our heart, they're about how we can grow and how we can succeed. And they usually don't incorporate anyone else. And so I would challenge anyone who has those beliefs. He does want us to prosper. We don't talk about that enough in church. But then sometimes we talk about it way too much. So it's like a fine balance. But he wants us to prosper. But at the end of it, he wants you to have a delight in him. And he will give you the desires of your heart. So that means that he wants you to find joy in him when you're sitting at the chef's table, not saying, I did this all myself, I just conjured it up and look, I'm here for 20 years, because that's dangerous, because that's a way that you can pull away in relationship because if you're not careful, your mind thinks, I made this happen. And it's human nature. If you make things happen, or if you feel that you're making things happen, then you're like, I did this all on my own. So I would challenge people to think about your desires in relationship to your relationship with God, and ask Him to purify some of those desires to make sure that they're not just centered on your prosperity. Because we have neighbors, you have kids, and you have, a spouse. Um, and these are people who matter in your world too. So it's not just about, us growing or getting to a status level, but what blessing can we provide to our children, so that they don't grow up to be egocentric to the point that, they have no humility or no heart towards other people in need. So that's what I would share. Again, I plan to travel, but I know that it's going to be also that I have to serve. And the greatest in the kingdom are those people who are willing to serve. I think about, the two characters in scripture who they're like, I'm the greatest because, me and Jesus are besties. No, I'm the greatest because I have, X, Y, and Z. And then the other disciples got in on it because they weren't included. That caused a lot of confusion. And Jesus squashed that by saying the greatest one among you is the one who wants to serve. So we also have to make sure that whatever we're doing, that there's service, and we're doing it with pure motives, not for what we can get out of it, because that will help us to just continue to grow. It will be an example. It will build kingdom.
That's good. Yeah, we briefly talked about this when I interviewed Anthony Fisher on just how, like, if you go in with a heart of, like, you want to serve whoever you're doing, it doesn't mean you have to run off to Calcutta. You don't have to, like, go live in, like, some, like, squalor village. And some people have, like, the heart, and that's where they're called, and that's amazing. But that's not where everyone will thrive. Like, we don't all, like, you don't just have to keep giving everything away and just, like, live off nothing. But it's, if you enter in, like, whatever you're doing as your purpose and mission. So if I approach a client and I approach them to serve them in a powerful way, then money is the byproduct of that, rather than going after them just because they have money or because they can serve me better. Oh, that person over there, I'll go talk to them and be their friend just because they can connect me with someone else, rather than I actually legitimately, like, just want to know about this person and get to know them. And, like, the byproduct is they just happen to be able to, like, it's a different mindset and heart posture.
That's right. And I think you said it really well, Craig. The posture of your heart. And we can tell when our heart posture is a little all over the place because it feels very self-centered versus God-centered. And so being aware and open to that when He shows you, like, hey, that's great, but where am I in this picture? Being open to God adjusting and changing that plan so that it's God-centered. I loved how you said that.
I think it was Myles Munroe, who, I'm gonna butcher it, but he was essentially saying, like, everyone wants to, like, go to this next level. Like, I want to, like, step into prosperity, or, like, I want to have, like, essentially, like, an increase in income and like abundance of just stuff. And he's like, well, then what are you willing to give up on that journey? Because you have anchors on you. It's not like in this realm of, like, any, like, people with money aren't evil. People who don't have money aren't evil. Like, it's not like, oh, you're poor, you don't love God enough, or you're super rich, God favors you way too much. That's not how, like, it's not how it works. But it's if you want to, like, move forward in wherever you want to go, what can you cut off from your life that's holding you back? Whether it's relationships, addictions, like, so, like, I was hugely addicted to video games. Like, oh man, ask my wife. Like, yeah, it was bad. And once I was able to cut that, like, I had a new level of freedom, and then I found more time to do stuff like this and be able to interview wonderful people. Like, there's, like, things that once we let go of something that might seem positive or not necessarily detrimental to our lives, in which we're able to make bigger strides forward.
That's right. And that's good. And I think, and I was trying to find this word, Craig, but you said it in a stewardship. So to whom much is given, much is also required. And if we're not stewarding the things that God has given us, so if He's given us a buck, like that buck means a lot to Him, but He's not going to give you $1 million if you squander off the buck and you're not, just honoring of what He's given. That doesn't mean, again, that we're not going to have mistakes and we're not going to, I've made my financial mistakes and He's gracious for that, but He still wants us to steward our time, our gift. He wants us to, make sure that we're giving of it in a way that honors Him and not just squandering it off. Because then we'll be like the prodigal son who's like, Daddy, just take me home. I'll be a servant. We don't want to squander everything we have, and we know that the Father reached him, in love, but look at how much truly was squandered away that, could have just been put to better use.
And I think for anyone who might not be familiar with, or you just heard the word steward around church circles a bunch, and you're like, that doesn't, is that, it literally translates to manage or manager. So if you're a good manager of whatever it is in your life, if you take care of your home or apartment, your family, that stuff will grow and prosper.
That's right.
So, just look at it as management, and you are a manager of everything that you have, including your creative gift. If you don't manage that and cultivate that, especially in a healthy way, or find a way to express yourself, then that can just kind of wither, and then like you said, you put it in a box and you hide it away, and then you just have this bitterness and resentment.
That's right. That's right. And I would say too, because you hit on it and it seems like it's important to share. As creatives, I think we need to be, for those who are, in the church community, we've got to be open, and we need to be the ones who have open arms stretched out for creatives, period. And I've learned now to have a great appreciation for the graffiti artist just as much as I do, the one who uses canvas. Because guess what? They're both creative, but it could be that, no one has accepted one or the other. It could be either or. And so we can't get into a box of saying, well, we accept this form of creativity because it's what everyone's doing. But no, the person who does, even though, they're tagging things, I've seen some pretty creative things being done, but they just need an avenue or an advocate, as well as an avenue of, how can I express this? Where can I not find judgment or shame or, you shouldn't be doing that, and we need to give creative people those opportunities. And so I would just hope that we would learn how to do a great job of, reaching out and not criticizing people who aren't artistic or creative in the way that we feel, because sometimes there's been that shame or guilt. And so there's still that creativity there, but we don't give a space for it to be healed. And so they keep tagging the houses, but they're creative. Give them something, give them a mural to paint. You just never know what the possibilities are.
100%. And I think that's one of my big goals with our group, Creative Survival, is a lot of times it can feel like that. It feels like you're just trying to survive. No one understands what we're trying to do, or we feel misrepresented, or you go through all this stuff, and it just, you work from client to client to client, and they're have this voice and this voice and this voice, but you're supposed to have your own creative voice. What is that? What is my identity when? And then it just becomes this big jumble. And instead of just trying to survive, it's just moving into a place where we can all just thrive together and grow together, because there's plenty to go around for everyone. We're all meant to do this. So why not do it together? That's
right. I agree.
Well, I just want to thank you so much for being here. I know we're out of time, but there will definitely be a part 2. Hopefully you guys want this too. So are there any parting words, tools, or wisdom you want to leave with us?
Really, the only thing I would say is go back and have fun. So, God gave us life for us to live it to the fullest. And so just as a creative, we don't want to block that flow of creativity. I would say the way that you cultivate it is just by simply enjoying life and enjoy the process. This is not a race, and just enjoy it at every moment.
That's awesome. So anyone who might want to connect with you or kind of follow and see what you're doing in your journey, where can they find you?
All right, easiest place is to go to ashleysauls.com. It has all of my social media links, and love to have you.
Awesome. I'll place that in the description below the video for anyone interested. Thank you so much, Ashley, for joining us. It's been a pleasure.
Thank you. I appreciate you, Craig. Thanks for the opportunity.
All right, bye.